questions in the middle. I will try to relay questions. Feel free to send them to the chat, and I'm happy to interrupt him and talk to him. You can also raise your hand and ask for voice, and we'll happily pass it on to you so that you can ask your questions throughout or at the end of his talk as you want. And without further ado, I would like to pass on the baton to Somesh. Please go ahead. We are excited to hear you speak.
Thank you so much, Matthias. Thanks for Mike, Nick, and also Matthias for inviting me here. My only pet peeve is that I have to follow Herbert, and I know how good a speaker Herbert is, so I thought scheduling should have been that Herbert goes last, drops the mic, and then it's all done, because I know how good a speaker he is. So I'll try my best. If I can get 0.7 close to Herbert, I would consider that as a good thing. So, because I've seen him speak, he's just superb. So I actually struggled a lot. So I think I just spoke at another conference, and that was more like a tutorial on Trustworthy ML. So I was struggling a bit, saying, okay, what should we talk about? And so I kind of made this. I try to make this talk so that it is not a survey. It gives you enough background so that I can talk about some problems. But I'm not trying to, the purpose of this talk is not to sort of give you like a deep dive into adversarial machine learning or trustworthy machine learning, but more to sort of, set up what agenda I have, and you will see that in the next slide. If you're interested, Zico Coulter and Alex Madri had a very in-depth tutorial at I think ICML or NeurIPS last year, and I put the link there. I mean, it's like a 4 or 5 hour tutorial, very nicely done. So if you want to kind of jump into that area, go to that tutorial by Zico Coulter and Alex Madri. In fact, I actually teach. I tell the students in my advanced security class to look at that tutorial. Good. So here is what I want to make. So I just came off a expert witness case. So I'm viewing this talk more as a sort of I'm a lawyer trying to, and you guys are the jury, and I'm trying to make this case to you, okay? So my case is that trustworthy machine learning, which has become a huge topic, needs a system level perspective. So I have 3 hypotheses here. And we need more people with a security mindset to enter the field. And we will talk a little bit more. As I said, more and more security, privacy, crypto folks are crossing over. So that's great. We need more. And we need more systematic and automated ways of evaluating resilience of ML components. So keep these 3 things in mind, and hopefully by the end, I have convinced you of these 3 things, and I'll think about the rest of the talk as evidence so that I can convince you of these 3 things, okay? And hopefully in my talk, I can do a better job of presenting evidence than these folks did in Michigan. So I hope I did do a much better job of presenting my evidence than the 2 people in this picture. Okay. So this is the next few slides are just basically going to be what is like motherhood apple pie stuff. ML is everywhere. I don't need to convince, believe it or not, few years back when I used to give the talk, you actually have to convince people no more. Healthcare, energy, transportation, ML is being used everywhere. So what we will start off by circa 2013. I don't know whether you remember, there were a lot of articles coming out that, hey, machine learning is reaching human level performance, okay, on many tasks. So face detection, object detection, breaking CAPTCHAs, and so on and so forth, right? And And my hunch is probably this is why captchas are getting so tough that even I think sometimes I was like, okay, is this like a street sign? What is this? Why are these captchas like that? Maybe that's the reason, right? The ML models are becoming really good at that. And this is more for, more for my family. Like a lot of my family thinks that I'm not a real doctor. I'm actually, I should have been a medical doctor. PhD is not a real doctor. And, ML is also beating doctors at various tasks like readings and, predicting heart attacks and so on. And, for this thing, I mean, machine learning is being deployed in adversarial settings a lot. So everybody knows about this Microsoft chatbot where after some data poisoning attacks, it started tweeting some crazy things. YouTube filtering can be very easily defeated. Like malware detection and all that we use. So generally, this is all about machine learning is being deployed in settings which is adversarial. And obviously, the big thing is safety critical systems, right? Like drones, robotics, autonomous driving. And this graph shows how more and more ML is being used in this sort of setting. Okay, now let me take you back to post-pandemic. And I don't know, people in the security community probably remember 2-3 years back, I think we had at Usenix Security in I think Vancouver, if you remember, and I had a very nice lunch with some senior folks like Dave Wagner and so on, and I think the discussion was, okay, what sets us apart? The security, privacy, crypto folks. I'm sort of lumping them all together. Maybe some people don't like that, but I'm just kind of lumping security, privacy, crypto in SPC here. What is different about us? What is our sort of X factor, right? I mean, what is different about us than systems or theory folks or ML folks? What is different about us? And it was kind of unclear, right? I mean, so the thing is, okay, because if you see, there are a lot of people in different communities that also do security privacy research, right? If you look at security people, there are a lot of people in that community who also do PL stuff or system stuff and other things. So what is about us that is different than the other communities? And, the idea is mostly the mindset, right? So here is in general and kind of how we view security, privacy, crypto things, right? And I'm kind of lumping them all together, but because so generally what we'll have is we'll have some system or primitive. You might have a encryption scheme, or you might have a program where you want to enforce control flow integrity. You have security goal in mind. So in crypto, you might say, hey, I want my scheme to be CPA secure, or in programs, you might say, I want to enforce control flow integrity. Then you have a threat model, right? Which basically says, what can an attacker do? It's basically all set of admissible attackers, correct? And then what you basically have to do is you would say, okay, in order for my security, I need some assumptions to hold. So for in crypto, you would say some problem is hard. So some sort of a shortest vector problem in a lattice or a prime factoring. In systems, you would say you basically have to describe your TCB or something very carefully and say, okay, I'm assuming that the attacker doesn't tamper with that, right? So for example, in the shadow stack cases, you might say, okay, nobody can tamper with my shadow stack. Or if you're sort of relying on a trusted execution environment, you say nobody sort of tampers with that. So these are the 4 components of, and again, I don't mean to say that these have to be formally defined, but at least when you write a crypto paper, you have these four things in mind. Maybe you're not a formal person, you don't describe them formally, but at least you have them in mind. And then you generally have a security argument. In the case of crypto, you have proofs with Greek symbols. In case of system security, you have some sort of an argument which says that if the adversary following the threat model can violate my security goal for a system or a primitive, then the adversary can also violate the security assumption. So remember, this is kind of a lot of security arguments are like almost contrapositive. If you basically say, if you can break my system, you must have violated one of the assumptions, all right? So either A has tampered with the TCB or you solve some hard problem. So this is what I mean. So most of this is kind of in the contrapositive. And I don't mean to say that all the security papers need to have a security proof, but even the security arguments are of this form, right? So my favorite paper is one of the favorite papers that is non-crypto. So crypto guys definitely follow this recipe, but even if you look at the proof, that the original proof of control flow integrity, so the CFI paper, there was one paper that was published in CCS, but they had a follow-up in some PL venue, which I forget now, maybe Popple or something, where they had a formal argument of CFI. It kind of sort of followed this sort of recipe. Okay, so when I say security argument, it doesn't mean you need to have Greek symbols. And generally, how do systems and primitives get broken? So systems and primitives get broken. The easiest is that, hey, in the paper, there was a shoddy argument of security and it's just not true. Well, that's the easiest one to kind of break. Your threat model is too weak. You basically say, for example, let's say I do, in control for integrity, your threat model is too weak. Well, in that case, obviously, your proof doesn't mean anything because your threat model was too weak. Your security assumption is not valid. So for example, in my trusted execution environment, there's a lot of great work which shows that TE can leak information. I think there's like a bunch of papers. I have not kept up with that field, but every time you see some paper go by. So obviously that security assumption that nobody can tamper with the TE or get information out of it is not valid. And the fourth one is the most interesting, is that some brand new and ingenious attacks are found. And then the idea is that you have to update your threat model, also update your security assumptions. So for example, the examples of this would be when Paul Kocher first did the differential, basically like, hey, if I look at power analysis, I can actually break some of the crypto schemes. Hovav's ROP gadgets paper comes to mind. Hovav has tried to explain to me the name of that paper. If you guys remember, the title of that paper is some Bob Dylan song, Innocent Flesh and Bones or something like that. I have never understood it. Even after Hovav has explained to me like 10 times, I still don't understand that title. I don't know why he didn't call it ROP attack paper, but whatever. So the idea is, to me, that in some sense, the last one is the most interesting, right? These are the most interesting breaks where it moves the field. I would say row hammer attacks, meltdown, Spectre, all of them are in that category. Where sort of like it's so ingenious that it kind of it's almost like a paradigm shift in the threat model. Okay, so this is to me kind of the sort of the important thing in security. The other thing which is very important is in security and crypto, the attacks, somebody attacks your system, somebody else fixes it, and the cycle continues, is how the field moves, right? I mean, if you remember, I don't know whether you remember, I mean, some of you are probably too young, but if you remember the early days of, symmetric crypto, it was like, okay, I sort of do something, then, there is this differential crypto analysis attack by Biham Shamir, then I fix it. And so we, at least I, and I'm sure others, don't take it super personally if our schemes are broken. Well, although it can be sort of a very, this is a very subtle point, and this is something that, Dave Wagner sort of told me that this is something that is very important to our field in some sense, right? This is that we don't take, somebody, okay, Matthias breaks my system. I say, yeah, shake your hand, buy you a big beer. I'll see how I can fix this, right? So we don't take it, well, unless it's like it's obviously a broken paper, but, it's a lot of times, some of these attacks are very ingenious. So this to me is extremely important. And I'll give you two, and I think this mindset is not there in other fields. They take it extreme, you attack their system, they take it extremely seriously. And, it gets very personal, and, there are a lot of things go back and, oh, you're accusing me of fraud, X, Y, Z. And it is something I think is our DNA in security and crypto, right? So for example, Tom Ristenpart was telling me that he had a scheme which actually was either found a weakness or broken by his advisors, later in a subsequent paper. His advisor actually had a paper and said, oh yeah, that scheme doesn't work. And people sort of like feel bad, but kind of move on. So I'll give you two examples of this, that others don't have this mindset. So I was talking to some authors from the Meltdown Spectre thing, and the architects, when I say architects, I don't mean people who build buildings. This is the computer architects. They actually, a lot of them didn't react very well to them, because they thought that, okay, the security community, these guys are trying to attack that, we are not doing good work or something like that. And they said they would have very hostile reaction from some of the architecture folks. Basically like, this is not a real attack, what are you trying to sort of like, like our 30 years of research, you're trying to sort of, throw water on that. And that's not the point. The point is that, it's like, okay, this is an ingenious attack. And now I think the community has moved to the point where every third paper in ISCA is probably about these kind of attacks and how to fix them. On a recent note, there was this scheme called, I don't know whether people have following Twitter. This has become a big sort of thing back and forth. There was a scheme called InstaHide that was proposed by some group from Sanjeev Arora and Kai Lee's group on privacy preserving machine learning. And the basic idea is that they have a simple encoding scheme, and you encode images, and then you build a model over these encoded images. And the idea is, because you're learning over these encoded images, it preserves privacy. And a group of us, some people from Google Brain, like Nicholas Carlini, myself, Sanjam Garg, a group from Virginia, followed by Mohammed, we started looking at this, and we actually attacked it, okay? And again, the thing is, you can follow all the discussion. You can just Google InstaHide attack, and you will see all the Twitter war and sort of like the back and forth. And to me, again, it's the same thing. Look, this attack is not saying InstaHide. I mean, we started looking at InstaHide because it was interesting. So the attack doesn't say that that work is bad. It's just that, okay, this is the part of our DNA. We do look at things critically, right? And so again, this is our security mindset. Okay, so but unfortunately, this mindset is not sort of shared by others. in other communities. I think generally the technological life cycle goes like, oh, there is some interesting thing that happened. So for example, in 1980s, if you remember, what happened is people realized, oh, I can do stuff in software that I used to do in hardware, and software is more agile, so let me move a lot of stuff to software, okay? I think some of you, again, sort of too young to probably get that. And then the phase two is, oh, what about security? What about critical bugs? And then, the security people get in, there are vulnerability finding tools, verification formal methods. So unfortunately, what happens is this security mindset is not there from the beginning in a lot of fields. And unfortunately, that is true in ML right now. A lot of, so in ML, we are basically in phase one, where people just have started to begin to look at this from a security mindset. Okay, so in general, there are three kind of attacks on ML. The first, I call active attacks on ML. So now we are moving, now that I've set the stage on sort of having this security mindset and so on and so forth, let us move on to now actually trustworthy machine learning. So in machine learning, I divide the attacks into three parts, okay? One are the active attacks. You actively try to tamper with the machine learning pipeline, okay? So either test time attacks, or poisoning attack, or backdoor attacks will be in this stage. So these are active attacks. And if you're from a crypto community, this is basically a malicious adversary. Then there is an honest but curious attacks. Okay, so what I basically call them is that you're not tampering with the machine learning pipeline, but you are using the machine learning model to maybe extract some information that you shouldn't. So this is something that I borrowed from the crypto literature. If you guys remember, whenever they do either protocols like secure multi-party computation, they first look at honest but curious model, which basically says, oh, we assume that everybody follows the protocol, and then what we can infer from just the messages going back and forth. That's where I drew this from. So the honest but curious models are, okay, I didn't tamper with the machine learning model, but by looking at the outputs of the model, I try to infer some information which I shouldn't. So like membership inference attacks, model inversion attacks, model stealing attacks, I would put in this category. Now, again, these are not clear cut. Sometimes there might be attacks that cross over between them. But for purposes of machine learning, it's good to have these kind of three classes. Then there are third attacks, which I didn't know what to do with them. So sort of ML for, you must have heard this phrase, ML for good, right? So using ML for good things like healthcare and social good and all that. Well, from attack side, there is this thing called ML for bad. I don't know, I didn't know. I'm open to, by the way, a good phrase for this. The idea is that, hey, if you can use ML for good, well, the attackers can use ML for sort of bad. So like deep fakes, you must have seen this, deep fake of Obama saying crazy things, generating fake Yelp, Google, Amazon reviews, so on and so forth. These are all done using generative models in ML, but it is basically using the same techniques that good people use, but they're using for bad things. So you might be wondering, why is that shovel there? So I didn't have a good picture for that. So I put a shovel there because a shovel can be used to do good things, but I can also hit people over the head, right? So that's kind of the idea. But I think I could use better pictures there. Okay. Generally, most of the times when attackers attack your system, what do they look for? They look for assumptions, either hidden or explicit, and they try to violate them, right? So for example, in early days of buffer overrun, all the PL people said, oh, nobody can overwrite my return address. it is a sacred thing. Well, guess what? That's what they did. So Paul Kocher's attack said, oh, nobody can look at the power spectrum of crypto algorithms, can they? Well, they did. Hardware memory can't be tampered with. Well, we know of attacks that do that. So, right? So the idea is that you look for hidden assumptions, and the attacker is trying to violate them. Okay, so here is our hidden assumption in machine learning. If you have taken any machine learning class or talk or whatever, machine learning 101, what happens? You say, oh, I have a training data drawn from some distribution, in this case, orange and blue. I train my model, and then I analyze my error or risk on test data that is drawn independently IID from the same distribution, right? This is how we kind of write the risk. Okay, this is very fine, and there are some very nice results in machine learning that say, oh, if you sort of in this setting, oh, what is the sample complexity, which is related to the VC dimension, all that beautiful theory, right? This is your assumption. Underlying all this is the assumption. And by the way, this I actually got from one of the talks that Ian Goodfellow gave. I thought this insight was good enough. It was so interesting that I thought that I should leave it. So this is an assumption that if you open up an ML theory book or something and you look at the definition of expected ERM or risk or something, this is it, right? Well, is the IID assumption true? No. If your adversary is controlling the environment, they can feed you examples from any damn distribution. Okay? Now, there are non-adversarial settings where this is not true also. But since this is a security audience, I'm going to focus on the first one. So for example, a lot of people in vision are dealing with this thing called domain adaptation, right? If I train my object detector in Berkeley and I try to use it in Seattle, where the lighting is probably very different, it's always cloudy. By the way, everybody dinks on Seattle that it's always cloudy. I have been to Seattle several times, but I don't know whether I'm the lucky charm or not. I have always had very good weather, so I don't know where that came from. But every time I go to Seattle, it's great weather. So I think this is a hint to MSR folks: if the weather is too bad, invite Somesh, and you'll get good weather. So the IID assumption is not true, and that's what attackers kind of violate. So here is a monstrosity. So by the way, so this is from Kevin, some researchers from Michigan and Berkeley. What they did is, remember, this is kind of now 3 years, 3 years back. So 3 years is actually ancient times now in trustworthy machine learning. There's so many papers published. This was the first physical attack. So what they did is they took a stop sign and they put sort of mangled and put graffiti stickers on it so that it looks like maybe a crazy person did it. And the stop sign was, I think, interpreted by detectors as a speed limit sign or something like that. So, and by the way, Erlens Fernandez was one of the authors here, who's also a faculty now at UW-Madison. He told me that this physical sign now sits in the London Museum of Modern Art or something like that. So, so now think about this way. If this sign screws you up, screws your object detector up, guess what? The attacker is going to keep playing this, keep repeating this in several ways, right? So it basically, think about this. What is the probability if in the distribution of, I don't know, road signs, what is the probability that you will see this monstrosity in the distribution, right? So that is the problem. So I think this is an insight, which I heard Ian Goodfellow talk about, and I love it. It's basically comes back to that the attackers are trying to find a hidden assumption and try to break it. Now, before we jump into things, let me first say that actually adversarial machine learning is very hot now, but it is not super new. In fact, the first paper that I saw was by Loud and Meek. Now, again, this is maybe pre the DNN hype, pre deep learning hype, but it was mostly done in context of spam detection. And, if you remember, machine learning was probably the first thing applied in spam filtering. And, so the attackers tried to change the spam so that it gets under your detector. So Loud and Meek had a very nice paper on that, which I think sort of predates. And actually in my class, this is one of the first papers I cover. It's a very simple, very nice paper. The other thing I wanted to break down is that although AML is hot, a lot of the theoretical techniques have been developed in other fields. So let's not forget some of that. And hopefully it will come back to sort of bite you. Okay, so now it's a little bit, again, Matthias, I'm happy to take some questions because now we're getting into the meat of it. If there are any questions so far?
Mostly Nick asking you to come visit soon because of the bad weather.
Okay.
I had like two questions. Like one of them was that that goes back to your initial threat modeling, and yes, you brought up the attacks and different sets of attacks, and it seems that we are somewhat biasing a lot of the research towards the attacks, and it's like there's this somewhat of an imbalance between attacks and defenses, and I wondered in a more general term if you can comment on that from your perspective. What's the value in an attack? Because if you think about it, the research value, I agree with you on the paradigm shift, right? So there's going to be a massive change for some of the fundamental new attack vectors. It's also hard to research it and to define techniques to figure out the new attack vectors. So how should we balance and compare between the two of them?
Yes.
Also, go ahead.
Yeah, that is a great question. So I do agree with you that I think I've seen these in conferences as well, that simple attack papers are sort of get in much easier. Maybe that's what you're getting into. Then a defense sort of, the bar seems to be higher for defense papers than maybe attack papers. That is true, and I think, but I will get to it. So I think even for defense papers, right? I mean, I'm sure you've got reviews like this where you said, okay, there is no security analysis here. Like, you didn't say, do a threat analysis or something like that. So I think, again, since I'm mostly working on this field, I'm finding that even some basic threat analysis for defense papers even, where you at least have a section saying, okay, this is my threat model, this is kind of what I tried, is sort of missing. But I agree with you that there are attack papers and then there are attack papers. There are some attack papers which are like, okay, yeah, it was some very simple thing they found. And sometimes I will not try to name the papers, but you sort of say, okay, yeah, sure. It's like, I don't know whether this should be a worth attack paper or you should just have put it on your web page as a blog post or something. But then there are, really, like, I mean, as I said, the Spectre meltdown or some really attacks, which is like, okay, moves the field. So I agree with you. I sort of struggle with that as well.
Yep. It seems to be hard. It's much harder to argue against the root shell than against the defense paper.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I sort of see that, and hopefully as a PC we can I think it is up to the community to kind of fix that, right?
Right. For a lot of the machine learning models that you discussed before, for example, the stop sign, I think it's a difference in perception. That's also one aspect here, right? The machine learning model sees something completely different, and it's not following our standards of evaluation. So the attackers move to a different dimension of evaluation, and they are using the analysis tool. Coming back to the kind of picture with the shovel that you used, you can use the analysis tools for good or for bad. And it's also a question that came up in the chat, that they can be used as a tool for bad and for good, and it fits, like any other software fits this kind of description as well. So it's more like existing tools enrich the set of our toolkit that we have, and they will be used in both ways in any case.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. For example, if you have a good vulnerability finding tool, it can be either used by a red team to fix things, but it can also be used by attackers to find vulnerabilities and maybe exploit them. But I think with the deep fake thing, there is an aspect that is, and you are the expert on vulnerability finding. You can tell me, but there is this aspect of deep fakes that is very interesting. That actually there is an amplification effect. So the idea is that, okay, I create a video of Barack Obama saying some crazy things. Then I embed it in a tweet, which does happen, and I tweet it out, okay? And people start retweeting that thing, I don't know, 10,000 times. So there is this thing where ML is being used for bad, but then the badness of it is amplified a lot by social media. So I think there is a social aspect to it. I don't know. I struggle whether it's the same thing, but I see what you're saying, that
you're hacking humans.
Yeah,
to some extent, and convincing them to react to it, and you're using humans as mules to go forward. So I agree. You're crossing the machine-human barrier.
Exactly, and by the way, Nicola Paperno, Dan Bonet, and McDaniel, Patrick McDaniel had a very nice paper that maybe deepfake is slightly different than other technical problems, because it is social plus technical. It is maybe not, you cannot totally solve it technical. So maybe that's where the difference might be. But I think that's a great question.
I would throw back the I love you virus.
That's true. That's true. But I think the thing with deepfakes is it's happening so much now. For example, I think I was just talking to somebody in Twitter, and they're saying that it is actually their biggest problem that they're dealing with right now. So maybe because of the amplification by social media, it's a different scale of problem now.
Yeah, very interesting point. Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so given the time, I'm going to try to speed up a bit. So this is kind of my cartoon version of an ML pipeline. You take training data, you apply your best learning algorithm, Adam or something, you get some parameters for your neural network model, then you feed test inputs and you get, hey, this is a cat, this is a dog, blah, blah, right? So there are attacks that kind of attack each step of them. So training set poisoning tries to poison your training set. Test examples try to give you examples that you will fail on or misclassify. Those are adversarial examples. There are also some attacks on tampering with the parameters of the model. There's also called model theft, which basically says, I'm going to interact with your model, but I'll just steal it. Okay. And by the way, there was a very interesting talk by Jeff Dean at one of the conferences that I attended. He gave the keynote, and he said that this problem, this model theft problem, is something they think is like the top-notch problem for them, because it basically takes away the marketing of the cloud, ML as a cloud service, right? So, okay. I'm not going to get into this too much. This is just some ML basics that I did, but I think we don't need it for this. Okay, let's get into training time attack. So this is an active attack, means, I need to tamper with your pipeline. And what I do is I try to do training data sort of to give you enough training data so that it screws up your parameters. So for example, here in my example, this is, I know there's a lot of nice malware example, but I think we are in Wisconsin and the snow season is coming. I got this from Jerry Zhu, one of our ML faculty. So this in Wisconsin, they do track number of ice days by the by year. And can somebody guess why? What is the, is it for us to feel bad that, hey, how many ice days do we have? Can anybody guess why anybody would track that?
I would have said climate research, but it starts too early.
No, it is actually climate research. So the idea is that if it is going down, that means it's one evidence of kind of that the Earth is warming. So apparently that is exactly right. So you can see the blue line is going down, okay? But let's say I have a climate denier. By the way, I just put climate denier in Google Images, and the first thing was Rick Perry that he's popped up. So I just put his mug out there. What I can do is I can change the data very slightly so that if I take any of the regression model, the line goes up. So this is a standard kind of a poisoning attack. Okay. So in formalizing it, Alice data set S of size M. Alice gives the data set to Bob. Bob picks a certain fraction of data sets and poison them. You could either replace points or delete them. Both are covered. And the goal of Bob is to maximize the error of Alice. And goal of Alice is to get as close to learning from clean data as possible. Okay, so this field is not new. This is something that people in robust statistics have covered a lot. But this is kind of the formalization of in sort of the poisoning attack. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to flash papers that sort of cover this in sense that if you want to carry this on. There was a very nice tutorial in ICML 2020 by one of my colleagues, Ilias Diakonopoulos, who, and if you're interested, go look at that tutorial. So if you look at the last one, is very interesting. This is a paper by Tudor, and this is the most relevant to, I think, the security community. So the idea here is most of the work in poisoning is untargeted, in the sense that, I just want to expand increase your loss error, okay? But think about malware detection. Let's say if I'm using ML to say something is malware or not, all I want is my malware to be not classified as malware. So what I'm more interested in is targeted poisoning attack, where I poison the data so that my malware gets through. So Tudor has a very nice paper, and I think if he's on the audience, please send the check soon, Tudor. So I'm giving a shout out. We need more work here. So it seems like a lot of the theory the ML theory community has focused on untargeted poisoning. I think we need a lot more in the security community. So for example, if I'm using ML for threat intelligence or malware detection, well, I don't care in general error, right? I care that my threat or my malware goes through. So the poison, the targeted poisoning is much more interesting to the security community. And I feel like it is less people are looking at it than the untargeted. Okay, so this again comes back to the systems perspective that I was talking about, is that from the systems point of view where this is used, if you look at malware detection or intrusion detection, perhaps the targeted poisoning attacks are much more interesting for the security community to look at than the untargeted one. Great. Now again, this is kind of the part. I will sort of make a case later, but this is the part of the thing where I kind of go through some of the attacks. The model extraction is in the honest but curious kind of model, where basically what I do is I interact with the model and essentially extract your model. And once I've extracted a model, why the heck should I pay for it, right? So there is this term called ML as a service. What I do is I have a malware detection machine learning algorithm. I put it on the cloud. You give it executables, and I say whether it's malware or not. Well, if by using relatively few queries, I can extract the model, well, then the whole business is gone, right? I can just use your proxy model, and I don't need to pay you. So the idea here is that you have a classifier F. You make certain queries to the classifier, and I learned a model G that is pretty close to F. And we also, so this has already happened. We had a paper in Usenix Security about 2020, and this, I think the paper that kind of started it all was by Florian Tramer et al. At Usenix Security 2016, which is called Stealing Machine Learning Models. By the way, one thing very interesting is, if you look at our Usenix Security 2020 paper, we make this is not new. This is what in machine learning kind of people talk about of active learning. And sort of this case is made in our paper. Okay, now ML for bad. I don't need to say this, but generating fake news and so on and so forth. This is the news all over the time. So you must have seen this, video of Obama saying bad things, automated reviews. So here, this is very interesting to me. There is a very interesting paper by Nicholas Carlini and Henry Farid in CVPR. I think maybe there is a full version of this. So if I'm a security person, this is something that I would really dive into. So a lot of people are trying to detect deep fakes by looking at the frequency spectrum. So the idea is that a natural image might have a different frequency spectrum as what you generate from things like GANs or flow models. And they're kind of trying to leverage that. And this paper basically shows that, okay, that probably is not going to work, that scheme. Okay? Here, we need a lot of work. There's a lot of work going on, but we need more work in deep fake image detection. I don't know. I think maybe Matthias, I can ask somebody. So this reminds me a lot of how many people remember this whole. There used to be a security community which is kind of dead now, called watermarking, image watermarking. I don't know whether there used to be even a conference called Information Watermarking and Hiding, where the idea is that I have a picture, I watermark it using some images, so that later I can say, hey, this is my picture. And Matthias just stole it and put it on his website, and he's trying to make money off it. And essentially what happened there is somebody would propose a watermarking scheme, and some people will break it. and then somebody else will do it, and that cycle just never stopped. And actually, Ross Anderson and his group used to be the ones breaking schemes all the time and information watermarking. And I think what happened is finally, in some sense, a lot of that community, from what I can tell, is sort of just died down. And I don't know whether we see papers in that space anymore. I don't see it. And to me, this is very similar. And we need more work in this space. Okay, now we come to test time attacks, which are active. And here, the idea again is you want to generate some inputs so that the attack that are intentionally designed, like that stop sign, so that the model is fooled to make a mistake. This is a definition I took from Ian Goodfellow's paper. So again, I think you cannot have a talk on trustworthy machine learning without this thing where a panda gets transferred as a gibbon. So this was the first attack that came out. And essentially what they do is they add some very well-crafted noise to this model, and it gets classified as a gibbon. And again, on the right, it is adversarially generated review. And you can have school bus turn into an ostrich, my favorite one, tabby cat going into a guacamole. And adversarial examples can also be extended to other kind of models, not just deep learning, and also go beyond computer vision, like malware detection and so on and so forth. Okay, so what is our definition here? So our definition is that we have some oracle, that is the oracle from the Matrix movie, my favorite, and that oracle basically tells you whether two images are same or not. Okay, they say, okay, this is cat. And essentially, local robustness means that everything that the oracle says the same, don't worry about the formula, is classified the same in the model. Okay. Now, unfortunately, we don't have a good proxy for the human oracle. So what people look at is they sort of approximate this oracle by things like L infinity norm, L1 norm, LP norm, which is but just think about that, those norms as sort of approximation of that. Now, folks have started criticizing that, oh, LP norm is not the right thing, and they have started looking at other norms like perceptual norms and so on. But the basic idea is that we don't have a succinct function that says, okay, these two images are the same to a human. That's a basic problem. Now, the threat model here is white box. People have looked at white box model, black box model. Some people have also looked at gray box models. And I'm not going to go too much into attack because we are running out of time. But the first attack was very simple. That came out in ICLR 2015, which basically what it does is very simple. So what we do is when we train a model, when you take a stochastic gradient descent step, you take a step in the direction of the negative of the derivative of the loss function. Well, what the attacker is going to do the opposite. They take a step in the direction of the positive of the gradient of the loss function, right? And that's kind of what this model did. So that's how they generated the perturbation. So it's a very simple attack. And then Madhuri has extended this to where you can do multiple steps of this attack. It's called the PGD attack. So these are the best untargeted attacks. So untargeted means that you don't have any control over sort of what happens with the perturbation. Our paper, this was with sort of Nicola Papernaw and Patrick McDaniel, was in Euro S&P, was the first targeted attack. So the idea is that you want a cat to turn into a guacamole. Okay, in the untargeted attacks, you have no control over sort of what the targeted sort of the attacks are. So here I want 1 to turn into a 4. This in the MNIST. category. And the algorithm is looks complicated, but it is really not. It's basically doing almost like coordinate descent, looking at what pixels are the most important to change, and sort of doing it iteratively. There's a similar attack in Carlini's paper as well, Carlini Wagner. A little bit about this paper. It was kind of interesting, just as an anecdote. So I was at the Google Faculty Summit. Ulfar was arranging it. Ulfar has moved to Apple, and basically this paper was presented. Sort of the paper by Goodfellow and Shahzadi. And we kind of did this paper more as a curiosity. And, who knows, right? I mean, it's like funny. The paper is in 2016, and it is already close to 2,000 citations. It's amazing how the field has really moved. Okay, so the other attacks are also like Carlini Wagner. There's an Athalai Carlini Wagner, which we'll get to. Now, there is also an attack we had which can do black box attacks, where we actually don't have the model, and it is a very simple attack. The idea here is that if I can build a substitute model using techniques very similar to like in model stealing, then once I have a substitute model, I can run a white box attack, right? That's kind of what this paper did. And people have looked at other sort of things. Now, I have put this Rubik's Cube at things where I see some synergy from the DS3 perspective. So there are people who are looking at black box adversarial attacks. So for example, this is one paper. You can think about this as a very powerful black box learner in some way. I have wondered whether there is some synergy to verification and fuzzing. The idea is that you want to do some fuzzing, but you don't have access to the source code. So maybe some of these techniques can help the guided fuzzers, even in cases where there might not be sort of, full white box access. And so this is something that I feel with the DS3's perspective. I think the idea is that there can be knowledge transfer both ways, from the adverse trustworthy machine learning side and from the software side. Okay, now what about defenses? Okay, this is where we need really a lot of the DS3 folks to jump in. So I don't know how many people know, there was a paper in ICML in 2018 that got the Best Paper Award by Anish Athale, Carlini, and Wagner, which basically what it did is, it was a stunning paper in my view. They took 8 defense papers from the previous ICLR, which is 6 months before, and showed that 7 out of the 8 defenses were broken. Okay. And I will get to what the issue was there. So just from a point of view of how stunning this thing is, just remember, this is like, I have a paper that appeared in Oakland that broke 7 out of the 8 papers out of CCS or whatever, or Usenet security or something. So I was just and it's a very simple paper, but I feel like this is a must read, because this is, to me, almost like security mindset, people coming in and saying, okay, look, guys, this is not how you do security. And Nicholas Carlini's talk from ICML focuses on that. And I would say that everybody should watch that talk. It's great. So what happens here? What happened in this case? So let us analyze this. This is like sort of, I mean, obviously these, and you can check, all these 7 things that were broken, but were really good people. I mean, this is not like, some very strong people in machine learning who were trying to do this defense. So what was the cause here? And I claim that sense of some of it is that the security mindset is missing from some of these folks. Okay, I don't want to say all. By the way, whenever I have a question that I want people to ponder, I put this person's name, this person's picture on the right. And if somebody can guess in the chat, whenever I meet this person next, I owe them dinner. Okay, don't Google, no Googling, just let me know who that person is. So the problem here was the following. Here is the thing. So suppose I propose a defense. Okay, so let us take a specific defense that some of them proposed. Some of them proposed a defense based on GANs, using GANs. Okay, the idea was to use GANs, and I'm going to pull back the example before predicting. So this is called GAN defense or something. So let's just take that example. Okay, and what they did is they evaluated their defense on existing attacks like Carlini-Wagner, PGD, FGGSM, and it was doing great. Okay, it was doing great. So what these guys did is they said, okay, fine, that is great, it's doing well on existing attacks, but what if the attacker knows that you're using the GAN as a defense? Well, if the attacker has his own data set, well, they can train the GAN also, right? They can train a GAN. I mean, the attacker knows machine learning. The attacker, and then essentially what they do is that the attacker can train again, they can generate examples that fool this GAN defense. So the idea is that what this paper did was very interesting. If you look beyond, they said, okay, guys, in order for this field to move forward, we have to look one step ahead. It's not enough to evaluate your defense on existing attacks out there. You have to look at an attacker, which now people call adaptive attacks, that essentially doesn't know your exact parameters in some sense, but knows that you're using a GAN. So, well, then I can use that in my attack. So these are called adaptive attacks. And so the thing is, we need a lot of work here that how can you make this adaptive attacks on the system, these ML systems, can then be made more systematic? Or are you going to wait for your system to be broken by Carlini? By the way, whenever I put out a paper, I will send it to Nicholas and Dave Wagner, and I kind of keep my fingers crossed that what the heck, okay, and then I'm drinking coffee, like 20 coffees a day before I hear from them. But that's not a scalable solution here, right? We cannot be waiting for Nicholas to be attacking everything. We need some way of having at least a systematic blueprint saying, hey, if you have an ML defense, use this blueprint. No, it's not enough to take an attack that is out there and say it is sort of secure against existing attacks. You have to look one step ahead. Okay, this is a challenge problem for the DS3 community. I don't know. I think we cannot clone Nicholas Carlini, I don't know, 50 times. So again, this is to me a question. And Matthias, let me know if anybody responds to my challenge, who that is. So after this sort of big attack, and by the way, there were people it was a very, very, very interesting talk that Nicholas gave, because there was he was getting pretty hostile questions from the ML people, like, oh, the security community is so hostile, and why are you always attacking us? But again, this goes back to what I was previously telling you, that in the ML community, they are not used to people coming and just poking holes in their stuff. So there is this move for something called certified defenses, where basically what you do is with the prediction, you also give a certificate that you're robust in an epsilon ball. Okay, Matthias.
Patrice Godefroy actually asked a question. There's a couple of other questions that I let ramping up for afterwards, but there's one question that I think fits this discussion before you move on to the next topics.
Yes.
And Patrice says, ML folks would say that trustworthy machine learning is impossible to achieve because
I get to that.
By construction or definition, machine learning is just a statistical best effort approach with no guarantees against worst case. Attacking machine learning is worth doing only to remind everyone that machine learning is not trustworthy, but this fact is already well known and undisputed by the machine learning community.
I agree with that, but the thing is that, so to me, I kind of get into that a little bit. But what I'm also thinking is that, but that's fine. I sort of agree with Patrice's point. It's very hard to disagree with Patrice. But the thing is, for good or bad, machine learning is being used in very critical settings. So we need to get to the bottom of this robustness trustworthy problem. And sort of basically saying that, okay, and this is maybe even gets to my point that maybe then the idea is to, view ML as a defective component, maybe in a fault tolerant setting and saying, okay, this thing is not robust. What can we do in a full system setting to tackle this? Yeah. So I get to this a little bit. So Patrice, I get to that. And if I don't answer that, please kind of correct me again. But again, I think just to sort of, the machine learning people can say that, but there were 3,000 papers published in Trustworthy Machine Learning on, so they are saying that, but not following their advice and still writing ICML NURIPS papers. So I think we need to, they are not following their own advice.
And another point maybe to figure out the bounds of the trustworthiness, like what are the guarantees? CFI can be bypassed, right? But it still gives you additional guarantees by making attacks harder. So knowing how much harder it is would already enable a defender to reason about that.
Yeah, and then, that leads to me that what happens is that's what kind of the certified defense is trying to do. What it basically does is that it says, okay, this is a cat, and I can also certify that in this epsilon ball, if you change, it still stays a cat. My prediction is robust. That's the certificate. But the problem with a lot of those models is there are a lot of points that it cannot certify, even legit points. So that is the problem. But there is, I think, a move to go to these certified defenses. And this maybe also answers Patrice's point, is that essentially certified defenses says, okay, I can guarantee this is a stop sign, and it stays stop sign within this epsilon ball or something. Now, if it says that, okay, I can predict this is a stop sign, but I'm not certifying it, then maybe you can have a logic upstream in the autonomous driving handle that, saying, okay, hey, this thing is saying it's a stop sign, but it's not sure. So let me do something else. Maybe look at other sensors or something. So there is this move towards these certified defenses, and maybe that is because of what Patrice just said. Okay, there is also a lot of work going on in verifying. You want to verify that in an epsilon ball, that sort of it is not, the prediction doesn't change. The first paper was this paper by Katz et al. From David Dill's group. But again, I think what is happening is the size of models, and somebody can correct me, that these verification techniques can handle right now are not realistic. Okay, there is one defense that was not broken by the onslaught of Atala Carlini Wagner. Okay, and this goes back to this idea of using classical techniques. And the idea was there is this whole field of optimization called robust optimization. The idea is very simple. The idea is when I train my machine learning models, I'm minimizing the expectation of my loss over a bunch of data. What I do is I minimize the expectation of the maximum of the loss. I see what is the worst case point around that sample, and I want to, so it's kind of a min-max formulation. This goes back pretty, it's not a new field. This book is, I think, 20, 30 years old. Now this attack, this is called adversarial training in the literature. And there are two versions of robust optimization. One is called uncertainty-based, one is called distributional. And both of these were not broken by Carlini. They were not able to break it. Now, I'm not saying that it is not broken, but at least this is considered now. Adversarial training is very simple to understand. And I think both Patrice and I come out of the model check-in community, so I view this as counterexample guided retraining or refinement. Is basically what you do is you take, before you train your model, you take the data element, you apply the best attack you can do, so like PGD, and you train on that worst case attack rather than the sort of the actual model. So you train on the attack, basically, the attack model, attacked example. So this is called adversarial training, and it is actually used to be pretty slow, but there, because what happens is before training on an example, you have to basically do the PGD attack, but there is a lot of work going on speeding this up. Now this comes back to what Patrice is saying. There is a lot of results going on, is basically, hey, there is maybe, if you want robustness, you have to give up accuracy, okay? And so there's a lot of theoretical work going on, including some stuff that I've been doing with Kamalika. We have some results which says that, hey, if you had more samples, maybe the model gets robust. Maybe if you spend more time, but maybe it's an issue of computational complexity. I would say the jury is still out, but it is a pretty standard thing that if you want robustness, you need to give up some accuracy. So there is a trade-off between that, and this is what I think Patrice was saying. By the way, I don't want to get into this because there's some time, but anything people come up with, like I think there's a lot of explainability techniques people are doing, which is related to trustworthiness. It says, you want to explain what your model is learning, right? Like, so you must have heard of things like SHAP, integrated gradients. People have attacked that as well. So for example, this attack shows that I can attack take a windflower, slightly perturb it so that even explanations look very different for the same picture. So the idea here is anything people have done, people have started attacking. And again, I think this is good. I don't know, Matthias, but I think this security people have been attacking a lot of this, and I think that's good. I won't get into that. And there's a lot of work on verification of these models, and I'm not going to get into that this one. Okay, this comes back to Patrice's question. What do we want here? So think about crypto. And crypto, to me, again, maybe this is because I've been I've been teaching Intro to Crypto from Jonathan Katz and Lindell's book, is a big success statement, right? So think about an encryption scheme, which is key generation and DEC. What I do is, if you look at a crypto textbook, I say, okay, this is chosen plain CPA secure, which basically means, think about it as chosen plain text attack, which is a very powerful statement. and then I'm done. Okay, I prove my scheme. I don't know, take your favorite scheme. I say this is CPA secure, and I put my scheme out there, correct? Then I don't care about how this, I really don't care how this encryption scheme is deployed. You can use it in WhatsApp, you can use it in whatever, you can use it in HTTPS. I don't give, this is sort of a very, 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 very strong argument, right? Can we have robustness? Wouldn't that be nice, right? I say, okay, here is my object detector, which is secure. Go use it anywhere. I am done. This would be really nice, right? And I think Patrice is listening, sort of, I think, can we get there, right? To me, this is a huge, huge win for cryptography, right? This is a huge win for cryptography, right? I mean, think about, would we be using all these encryption schemes if for every scenario like HTTPS, WhatsApp, Telegram, whatever, I had to prove again my security proofs. Now, what happens is sometimes what happens is when you use them in some specific protocols, some things come up and you have to kind of be very careful there. But think about if for every one of these, I had to redo these proofs, right? I think that would be a nightmare, right? But to me, this is a huge win for cryptography. And if there are any cryptographers of the audience, I'm taking donations. I'm a GoFundMe page for you guys. To me, this is kind of a sort of, to me, it's a big win. I would say that, even things like control flow integrity kind of say, right, that hey, if you under these assumptions, I can tell you that you will not follow any of the illegal paths in the control flow graph. Now, that turns out that that is not enough, that's fine, but at least you're getting a very strong guarantee. So this is a question for the DS3 community. Is this achievable for machine learning? And I think Patrice sort of screwed up my punchline here by already saying no. But if there are other people who want to opine on this, this would be the holy grail, right? If this was true, then the ML people go away, do their thing. I don't care. And then they say, okay, here is an object detector. It is accurate and robust. Go and play with this. And he also sort of, Patrice already said this, but I don't think this is possible. Okay? You cannot have a guarantee, at least for me, which talks about robustness, accuracy of ML, which is disentangled from the problem space in which the ML is being used. So for example, I'll give you this, right? I have a perfectly robust ML algorithm. I say everything is a cat. It's really robust, but it's useless, right? So I think this tension between robustness and accuracy, I think the answer is no here. I don't think we can get crypto style guarantees in this case. There is some very interesting, so in Oakland 2020, there is a very interesting paper in the malware space which kind of hints at that as well. It's called Intriguing Properties of AML in the Problem Space. We have some work also in this space. Now, I think this is a very big discussion to have. So I'll stop here for 1 second if people have questions. This is a very important point. I don't think we can get crypto style guarantees for ML components. So unfortunately, you cannot disentangle the problem or the system away here.
Let me start with the question from Imeric.
Yes.
He's asking, do you think that explainability techniques could provide a basis for definitions of robustness of networks? For instance, thinking about integrated gradients, could we define adversarial examples as inputs classified as class N, but whose important neurons do not match the output of integrated gradient on the training test set for class N?
Yeah, I think people have tried that, but again, I think some of those schemes have been broken by our friend sort of Cardini. So you have to sort of think about it. Again, I sort of, this is a challenge that I gave before. Here is a challenge. So I like the idea of using explainability techniques, and we had a paper last year in NeurIPS, but which tried to do something like this, and I can sort of point some pointer later, is that we need, as a community, we need to get beyond this thing that, okay, you propose a defense and you take existing attacks, Carlini, Wagner, PGD, FGSM, and you say, oh, none of them, the robustness went up. You have to look one step beyond, saying, how will the adapt, if somebody wants to adapt these attacks, knowing what will they do? Okay? And again, I'm from the PL community, so I think fixed points. You can then think, go one step ahead. You can fix your defense based on this adaptive attack, saying, okay, now what the attacker will do, and eventually you probably would reach a fixed point. I know that's a lot of work, but to me, we need to get at least one step ahead. Right. And this current paper by Florian kind of said that. So let me just sort of end this. So I think as I said, the big glaring omission from adversarial machine learning is that we are not giving, everything is kind of detached from, they are not application aware. And I'm going to, given the time, I'm just going to hit with my punchline and then take questions. And I had, unfortunately, a lot more slides and you can see that. I will make these slides available. Okay. Here is what sort of I wanted to say. Closing argument, and then I'll take pictures. So sort of questions as well. I think trustworthy machine learning kind of needs a system level perspective. Okay, where you talk about the system that the ML is being used in. I don't think there is anything getting around that. And we need more people like security mindset, like Nicholas and others, to really cross over. And this is happening, by the way. I was very impressed that Shafi Goldwasser and all these people are now trying to, they're addressing these problems. And again, we need more of this security, privacy, crypto people to be jumping in. And the third is we need a more systematic, automated way of evaluating resilience of ML components. So we need like a bot. We need an algorithm that basically says, okay, how would Carlini attack our system, but not have Carlini there? It's like a blueprint. And Florian's paper in NeurIPS is trying to get there. And this is kind of my closing argument. And sort of, I hope I did better than those two people that I showed before. And again, I think that the thing is, maybe this is not as intellectually satisfying as crypto in that, I can prove my things and I put it out there, but maybe there's no getting around that. This is a messy field because I think ML components have these two things. You're balancing robustness and accuracy, and maybe there isn't something like a crypto style thing you can do. On that note, though, we have tried looking at this, whether crypto framework can help here, and we have some initial results. You might want to look at this paper that we try to bring the crypto mindset, but I'm not going to talk about this. I'm going to take now questions because there's not much time left.
Thank you very much, Somesh. This was a very exciting talk. I already have a bunch of questions lined up.
Okay.
While Somesh is asking these questions, everybody feel free to type, as it seems to be the most common way. Maybe you just like to hear me speak as well. So feel free to type the message. I'll happily relay them to Somesh one by one. And I think
you do have a very nice baritone voice, so that is good.
Very nice. I bought a professional microphone, so it's all smart AI that is improving my voice. Like I'm cheating a little bit here. Following up on your last argument, Mike Hicks asks for the question regarding robustness. Is there a relationship to differential privacy that you can bridge? Can you tie accuracy and robustness via a parameter like differential privacy is epsilon? One extreme is everything is a cat, but there's a range. Then the research challenge is finding a practical epsilon.
Yeah, so that is a very interesting point, and I haven't sort of thought about it, but I think probably Mike knows this. There was a paper in I don't know, this year. You know, in pandemic, everything I'm getting confused. Is this 2020 or 2019 or 2018? What the heck is it? But so maybe it is this year or last year, by Suman Jana's group called Pixel DP, which essentially had a very similar thing. What you're talking about, Mike, is what they said is that differential privacy basically tries to say that, you know, if you sort of drop something from the database, your distribution doesn't change too much. And this is what robustness is getting at. So they do make this argument, but I agree that epsilon, right, even in differential privacy, what is the epsilon you set to get good utility is the key. And maybe, so that's that problem of balancing utility versus privacy is akin to what you just said, balancing accuracy with robustness. So that's a great point. And I think more work probably needs to be done there. Yeah. So, by the way, a shout out to Elena Opera. Elena Opera has a very nice paper in NeurIPS, which is about like, okay, about this issue of setting epsilon. So maybe some ideas there can be applied. But I really like this analogy because this issue of balancing privacy and utility happens there as well, right? I mean, I can have a perfectly random algorithm that is very differentially private. I replace every row with a random. I give you every time a random answer. Well, that's the most differentially private algorithm I can have. So yes, though that problem is similar.
Two quick notes. Konrad Rieck said that watermarking is now a workshop, the ACM workshop on information hiding and multimedia security. So it is living on. Okay. And Alfonso gave the correct answer first of the users here, Yiddu Krishnamurti, the thinker.
Yes. So yes. And so he actually, so this is he's a mindfulness guru from India who I follow quite a bit. So I think he deserves a free dinner. Catch me when the conferences are all back and you have a good dinner waiting for you.
We'll see you next year at Usenix Security, I guess.
Hopefully. Hopefully.
Another question from Patrice Godefroy. Since machine learning is inherently untrustworthy, perhaps this will be a new boon for verification. One needs to verify properties of the predictions outputs made by machine learning. An example, verify that a GPT-3 generated program satisfies its specification prompt. Do you agree, or are existing verification techniques unsuitable for that?
I completely agree that if we had a scalable verification technique that can handle something like GPT-3 or the latest ResNet, great. But what I'm finding is, and maybe Patrice, you know, I think Patrice has proved me several times wrong before. The problem right now, what is happening in verification is that we are 3 or 4 generations behind, I would say. So there are the benchmarks we can do right now. I think, I don't know whether somebody can maybe put on chat. Every year, the number of parameters in the state-of-the-art models are sort of I don't know, doubling, tripling, whatever. I don't know what the latest is, but I think in some sense there's a bit of catching up to do here. But I agree, if we can get there, where it is where it can catch up to the state of the art, I think that's kind of sort of the best solution. And maybe the other thing is, I think that is a very interesting sort of point. One thing that I think, just to follow up on Patricia's point, very under-researched area. The idea right now in machine learning is that you just train the model, and it is okay, and then you verify. There is no synergy between verifying and machine learning, on verifying machine learning. For example, if I have a ReLU network and I know that very few ReLUs can be actually activated, so it's a sparse, then we know that the verification will get easier. So there was a very interesting paper. Unfortunately, I don't know why it was. They never published it, just sitting on archive. I find this a lot with machine learning. There are a lot of interesting papers that sit on archive and they never get published. So I don't know what the deal is. Maybe they move on to some other things, where they basically say that they can have a training procedure that can train more sparse ReLU networks, where less ReLUs are activated, which I can see, which will make the verification procedures much more scalable. So I think maybe there is an interesting point here, is that rather than taking a pre-trained model like GPT-3, can I train GPT-3 to have some characteristics so that the downstream verification becomes easier? So like ML verification co-design. I kind of really like that angle, but I don't think many people are doing this. So that's something that, but yeah, if we can get there, that would be the perfect solution.
Yep. Sorry for mispronouncing the name. I'm not entirely sure. Shuvendu Lahiri asks, should we think of robustness of a machine learning model embedded in a system, or as a safety specification it has to be strictly enforced, or a desirable metric that one has to optimize for, but systems guard against it?
Yeah, that is a very interesting question. The problem is, so I had this exact discussion with Sanjit Sesha a few weeks back, and the idea is that let me repeat the question. The question is, do you view robustness as a metric or a specification in some way? Like, I think it depends, right? I think the thing is, unfortunately, I don't have a good answer, which means it's a good thing to research. Is that, for example, if you're robust on images that really matter in the autonomous driving setting, well, then your robustness can be 95%, but I am not robust on images that really matter. For example, if I'm not robust on pedestrian pictures, detecting pedestrians of a tall Indian guy with crazy hair, which is me, well, then I will be the one hit with the autonomous cars, and that is not good for me. Your robustness might not be 99%, but that 1% is going to kill me, right? So I think we don't have a good answer there. Shubhendu, unfortunately, I don't have a good answer. And I think this is the exact discussion I had with Sanjit. We have something going on 2-3 weeks back. I think Shubhendu knows Sanjit, so I don't need to. He's a CPS verification, formal methods guy. And unfortunately, I don't know. I would have to say I don't know.
And that brings up this interesting question of corner cases, right? What is part of your training set and whatnot?
Yeah, but security safety is different, right? If your corner cases is all very important cases, well, then what does it matter whether it's 99% robustness?
Right.
Like, for example, this is what sort of like, I kind of struggle with, and I don't have a good answer to it.
Yeah, more research is needed, I guess.
Yeah, more research is needed.
We are a bit over time, and I was given the signal to start closing. I think overall this has been a very interesting talk. I enjoyed getting a deep dive into all of these different machine learning questions. Thanks a lot, Somesh, for giving such an exciting talk. There's a couple more questions that I will relay.
Yeah, and as I said, we need more of you in this field.
Yeah,
This
I
field,
agree.
sort of, I feel like it has been, just as a closing thing, it is much more skewed by ML folks, I would say, right now. But I think we need more people with security, privacy, crypto mindset here. I think we definitely need that.
Thank you, Somesh.
No problem. Thank you so much. And thanks for inviting me.
Thanks for accepting. It was a very nice talk.
See you all.